I now give the floor to Ms. Valentine Rugwabiza.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Caroline Rodriguez-Beckett, President of the Security Council, distinguished members of the Council, distinguished representative of the Central African Republic. Madam President, I would like to congratulate Guyana on assuming the presidency of the Council for this month of February. I have to say I'm specifically honored to present the most recent report of the Secretary General on the Central African Republic under your presidency of the Council, and to update on the recent development in the country, as well as the implementation of MINUSCA's mandate. Members of the Council, on 6 February, a special session of the Comité Exécutif de Suivi of the Political Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation in the Central African Republic was convened and chaired by His Excellency President Touadéra to mark the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Political Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation in Central Africa, APPR in short. The session took stock of the overall progress made in the implementation of the mutualized APPR and Luanda roadmap, and witnessed an important mobilization of national, regional, and international stakeholders, including the APPR guarantors and facilitators. The session appreciated the support extended by the international community, while calling on additional support for the implementation of the remaining commitments, and continuous support to the decentralization of the peace process. Speaking on behalf of all facilitators and guarantors, the Economic Community of the Central African States, ECAS, the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security commended the achievements secured through the implementation of the mutualized peace process, including the self-dissolution of 9 armed groups and the maintenance of former leaders of armed groups in the current government. In addition, the Commissioner called on remaining original APPR signatories to rejoin the peace and political process while commending the critical support provided by MINUSCA to the effective decentralization of the implementation of the APPR. Members of the Council, on 15th January, a little bit more than a month ago, a MINUSCA patrol hit an explosive ordnance device. That happened while returning from escorting humanitarian workers, delivering assistance to Zakundu, a village in the western region of Central Africa, which was recently the epicenter of an attack by suspected elements of the 3R armed group. The explosion killed Steve Emmanuel Atebele from the Cameroon contingent. It also injured 5 of his companions. Soldier Atebele was only 30 years old and a father. I express my condolences and those of the entire staff of MINUSCA to the family of the deceased and to the government of Cameroon. The tragic death of this young peacekeeper, which comes in the backdrop of similar incidents in the last few months, must give cause for expediency in the handling of threats posed to peacekeepers by explosive ordnance devices. It must also call for appropriate responses that must ensure thereto. It is critically important that we understand the sources and origins of explosive ordnance devices through the application of proper intelligence gathering, and equally pursue cross-border cooperation to stem the tide of weapons flow across boundaries into the Central African territory. Furthermore, countries in the region need to scale up cooperation towards effective border management and control to stem the proliferation of these weapons. Explosive ordnance devices, as well as light weapons, are not only a threat to the population and peacekeepers, but equally the most serious constraint to the delivery of humanitarian assistance in the Western region, where 50% of the Central African population live. I therefore wish to request this Council support for an urgent, dedicated, and truly multidimensional response to this threat, both for the protection of civilians and safety and security of our peacekeepers. We need to do the utmost to prevent this spread, the spread of these lethal weapons to other regions of the Central African Republic. This approach should include investing in situational awareness, as well as focus cross-border cooperation on the origins and sources of supply of these weapons. Furthermore, the multidimensional response should entail enhanced pre-deployment, troops preparedness, adequate training and equipment of contingents deployed, as well as capacity building of the national defense and security forces, and further promote communities' awareness and sensitization on this threat. Madam President, the Central African Republic is a vast country with a tropical climate, dense forest, and replete with impassable terrains. The road network in the country covers a mere distance of about 24,000 kilometers, most of which are dirt tracks with only 3% asphalted. The dirt tracks are unusable, can't be used for road transportation during the 8 long months of heavy rains each year. Throughout the country, many villages are not reachable and almost cut off year-round. In brief, Central Africa is a landlocked country with no internal connectivity roads. This not only constitutes a major challenge to the mobility of MINUSCA's troops and the national defense and security forces, and therefore to the protection of civilians and extension of Central Africa State Authority over its territory, but these problems are further compounded by our mission's limited transport and logistics capacities to project personnel and support operations. In response to protection of civilian emergencies in some of the remote areas, the mission must use all its limited air assets, leaving us ill-equipped to attend to other protection of civilian pressing needs. The lack of a bulk cargo aircraft has limited the mission ability to transport critical materials necessary to undertake our field projects to improve accessibility and mobility of MINUSCA's uniform and civilian personnel. As we prepare soon to initiate MINUSCA's budget deliberations, we sincerely count on the Council members and all member states to avail MINUSCA with the requisite transport and logistic means to consolidate and expand logistical support to the government of the Central African Republic, to the national defense and internal security forces to fulfill their primary responsibility of protection of civilians and exercise sovereignty over their territory. Distinguished members of Council, indeed, Resolution 2907, through which you renewed the mandate of MINUSCA, elevated the mission support to the restoration and extension of state authority to a priority task. MINUSCA, in coordination with UN agencies, has invested in key areas, including the redeployment of civil servants and other state agents from Bangui to their places of assignment in prefectures and sub-prefectures across the country. MINUSCA has also invested in the construction, refurbishment, and equipment of administrative buildings. As of January 2024, 86% of local administrative authorities are present at their post. MINUSCA provided logistic, security, and capacity building support to the Ministry of Public Service and Administration Reform and the Ministry of Territorial Administration, reaching a total of more than 5,000 civil servants present in the field compared to only 650 in 2013. I should state that our current mandate has raised expectations for even more. In this context, the mission will continue to enhance its close cooperation and joint patrols with FACA and the internal forces, especially in border areas and conflict hotspots. This is coupled with the urgent need for security sector reform, to which we continue to lend considerable support. However, the elevation of the extension of state authority to a priority task has not been accompanied by additional resources for its implementation, which, if not addressed during upcoming budget deliberations, could limit our ability to optimally support the additional mandated priority task. Furthermore, the magnitude of security sector reform and restoration of state authority needs cannot be supported by MINUSCA alone. I therefore encourage member states and partners with relevant expertise and institutional capabilities to support the Central African National Defense and Security Forces, and in doing so, supports the Central African Republic efforts and progress in building a professional army and internal security forces. There is simply no alternative to lasting security and securization of the CAR population and preservation of the sovereignty of the Central African territory. Madam President, this is an opportunity for me to salute the government of Central Africa for the adoption at the end of December last year of its 10-year national policy for the management of border areas. The execution of the plan calls for border cooperation between Central African Republic and neighboring countries, including through the activation of the border commissions. These commissions play a crucial role in the common fight against insecurity and all forms of illegal activities that are a perennial constraint to the economic development of the Central Africa. Members of the Council, on 8th of December, the government of Central Africa and MINUSCA jointly organized a seminar on strategic communication. The aim of the national seminar was to collectively take stock of achievements and challenges of the past mandate, but also acquaint the government and all Central Africa partners with the contents of the new mandate, as well as the respective roles and responsibilities of the government, of MINUSCA, of the UN country team, and the Central African partners in its implementation. The Strategic Communication Initiative, which was the first since the deployment of the mission, was highly appreciated by the Central African authorities and diplomatic communities in Bangui, as well as local authorities in the region. One of the major outcomes of the prefectural seminars was a general and clarion call for by women for support that will permit them to play an engaged and active role in the local elections and in the local implementation mechanism of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in their respective localities. I intend to continue to use my good offices and mobilize all the mission resources, the UN country team, and other bilateral and multilateral partners towards this goal. A more active and meaningful participation of women and youth in the political life of the Central Africa, especially in the peripheries, is central to their meaningful inclusion in the political and socio-economic development of their country. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank Ms. Rugwabiza for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor